When people think about volcanoes, they usually imagine rivers of glowing lava and towering clouds of ash, dramatic eruptions that destroy everything nearby. But the truth is that some of the greatest impacts of a volcanic eruption are not the fiery destruction close to the mountain, but the massive disruption that can ripple outward across entire regions, and even across the country and the world. The United States is home to a great many volcanoes, and among them are several that, were they to erupt, could cause disruption far out of proportion to their immediate surroundings, shutting down air travel, paralyzing cities, threatening water and power, and reaching into the lives of millions of people who live nowhere near the mountains themselves. This is the story of 5 American volcanoes that could cause massive disruption if they erupt, and of the surprising and far-reaching ways that a volcanic eruption can touch the modern world. But before we go a single step further, one honest and essential word. None of these volcanoes is erupting, and none is showing signs of an imminent eruption. Scientists cannot predict eruptions far in advance, and the great majority of these mountains will remain quiet throughout our lifetimes. This is not a warning of impending disaster, but an exploration of how, in the rare event of an eruption, these particular volcanoes could disrupt the modern world, and of why scientists watch them with such care. Quick honest word before we dive in. A lot of people watch these all the way through, love them, and forget the one small thing that keeps a channel like ours going, hitting subscribe. If you are finding this fascinating, take 1 second and subscribe right now. It genuinely matters for us and costs you nothing. And drop your state in the comments so we can see who is watching. Alright, let's begin. Why volcanoes cause disruption far beyond the mountain before we visit the 5 volcanoes? It helps to understand why an eruption can cause disruption far beyond the immediate area, because the reasons are not always what people expect. The most destructive effects of a volcano, the flows of lava and the searing clouds of hot gas and ash, are generally confined to the area near the mountain. And while they are devastating there, they affect a relatively limited zone. The far-reaching disruption comes from other products of an eruption, and above all from volcanic ash, the fine, gritty material that a large eruption can blast high into the atmosphere and spread across enormous distances on the winds. This ash is the great agent of disruption, because it can travel far from the volcano and cause problems wherever it falls or drifts. Volcanic ash disrupts the modern world in many ways. It is extremely hazardous to aircraft, capable of damaging engines and forcing the grounding or rerouting of flights across vast regions, which can paralyze air travel far from the volcano itself. When it falls on cities, it can collapse roofs under its weight, foul the air, clog machinery, contaminate water, disrupt power, and bring ordinary life to a halt. Beyond ash, some volcanoes threaten disruption through other means, such as the massive mudflows called lahars that can rush down river valleys toward populated areas, or the flows of lava that can bury infrastructure and cut off communities. And an eruption can disrupt the economy, the transportation networks, and the systems that a modern society depends on in ways that reach far beyond the mountain. Understanding these mechanisms of disruption is the key to understanding why the 5 volcanoes we are about to visit are so significant. Because it is not their power to destroy their immediate surroundings that makes them so consequential, but their power to disrupt the wider world. Mount Rainier and the threat to the Seattle region. We begin with a volcano that could cause massive disruption, not through ash or lava, but through a torrent of mud, Mount Rainier, the towering, ice-clad peak that rises over the densely populated region around Seattle and Tacoma in Washington state. Rainier is a beautiful and beloved mountain, but it carries a hidden danger because it is draped in an enormous mantle of glaciers and snow. More than any other peak in the lower states, and this ice sits atop a volcano whose rock has been weakened over the ages by volcanic heat and fluids. The great threat from Rainier is a lahar, a fast-moving torrent of mud, rock, and debris that can form when volcanic activity, or even the collapse of the weakened rock, sends the ice and loose material rushing down the mountain's valleys as a river of mud with the consistency of wet concrete. The disruption that a large lahar from Rainier could cause would be enormous, because the valleys that lead down from the mountain toward the lowlands are home to communities where a great many people live, communities built, in some cases, on the deposits of ancient lahars, meaning the mud has reached those places before. A major lahar could rush down these valleys with little warning, threatening towns, roads, bridges, and infrastructure, and forcing the evacuation of the areas in its path. The disruption would extend beyond the immediate danger to the transportation and economic networks of one of the country's major metropolitan regions. This is why Rainier is watched so closely, and why the region has developed lahar warning systems designed to give people precious minutes to reach high ground. Rainier is not erupting and shows no sign of imminent activity, but its combination of ice, weakened rock, and a nearby population makes it a volcano whose eruption, or even collapse, could cause massive disruption to a major American region, and it is often named as the volcano in the country whose activity could threaten the most people directly. What makes the lahar threat so significant is its speed and its reach, because unlike a slow flow of lava, a lahar can travel down a valley at the speed of a rushing river, covering great distances in a short time and reaching populated areas before people have much chance to react. This is why the warning systems are so important, because they are designed to detect the beginning of a lahar and to alert the communities downstream in time for them to move to higher ground. The disruption of such an event would extend well beyond the immediate destruction, because the valleys that lead down from Rainier carry not only homes, but the roads, railways, and infrastructure that connect the region. And a major lahar could sever these links, isolating communities and disrupting the movement of people and goods across a wide area. The prospect of such disruption in one of the country's major metropolitan regions is what makes Rainier a mountain that scientists and emergency planners take so seriously, even as it slumbers quietly beneath its mantle of ice. Here is something I would genuinely love to know, and it takes 10 seconds. Did it surprise you that a volcano's biggest threat can be a river of mud rather than lava? Drop a yes or no in the comments, because your reactions help us understand what surprises people most, and I read every reply. Okay, back to the volcanoes. Mount St. Helens and the Reach of the Ash, our second volcano, is one that has already proven its power to disrupt. Mount St. Helens in Washington state, which delivered the most significant volcanic eruption in the recent history of the United States. When it erupted, it did so with shocking violence, blasting away a huge portion of the mountain, flattening vast stretches of forest, and sending ash across multiple states, disrupting life across a wide region as the ash fell on towns and cities, darkened the skies, and brought ordinary activity to a halt. The eruption was a powerful demonstration of how a cascade volcano can reach far beyond its immediate surroundings, spreading disruption across a broad area through its ash. What makes St. Helens significant for our story is not only what it did, but what it represents, because it is the most active volcano in the Cascade Range and remains capable of future eruptions. A future eruption, depending on its size and the winds, could again spread ash across the region, disrupting air travel, fouling the air, coating cities and farmland, and interfering with the systems that a modern society depends on. The ash from such an eruption does not respect boundaries, drifting wherever the winds carry it, and it can cause problems far from the mountain in places that might never expect to be affected by a volcano. St. Helens is monitored intensively, and its every tremor is tracked. And while it is not showing signs of an imminent large eruption, it stands as a proven example of a volcano capable of causing widespread disruption through its ash. A reminder that the mountains of the Cascades are not distant relics, but living volcanoes whose eruptions can reach into the lives of people across a wide region. The eruption of St. Helens also taught scientists and communities a great deal about how to prepare for and respond to such events, transforming the way the country monitors its volcanoes and plans for their eruptions. The lessons learned from that eruption, about the warning signs that precede an eruption, about the far reach of the ash, and about the importance of evacuation and preparation, continue to shape the vigilance with which the Cascade volcanoes are watched today. In this sense, St. Helens is not only a proven agent of disruption, but a teacher, a mountain whose eruption improved the nation's ability to anticipate and manage the disruption that its volcanoes can cause. And its ongoing monitoring reflects the hard-won understanding that these mountains must be watched with care. The volcanoes of Alaska and the threat to air travel, our third entry, is not a single volcano, but the great collection of volcanoes in Alaska. because these northern mountains, though they rarely threaten large numbers of people on the ground, pose a distinctive and far-reaching threat of disruption to something most people never associate with volcanoes: air travel. Alaska is home to a large number of active volcanoes, strung along the Aleutian Arc and the Alaska Peninsula, and they erupt far more often than the volcanoes of the rest of the country. Because many of them lie in remote and sparsely populated regions, their eruptions rarely cause direct harm to people, but they can send enormous clouds of ash high into the atmosphere. And it is this ash that creates the potential for massive disruption. The skies over the North Pacific carry some of the busiest air routes in the world, connecting North America with Asia, and volcanic ash is extremely hazardous to aircraft, capable of damaging engines and forcing the rerouting or grounding of flights. When an Alaskan volcano erupts and sends ash into these skies, it can disrupt air travel across a vast region, affecting flights and travelers far from the volcano itself, stranding passengers, delaying cargo, and rippling through the interconnected system of global aviation. A single large ash cloud drifting over these busy corridors can force the cancellation of flights carrying tens of thousands of passengers, turning a remote eruption in an empty stretch of Alaska into a disruption felt on the other side of the world. This is why the volcanoes of Alaska are watched with great care, their ash clouds tracked, and their activity monitored, so that aircraft can be warned and kept safe. The Alaskan volcanoes represent a form of massive disruption that is easy to overlook because it does not involve lava flowing through towns, but their frequent eruptions and their position beneath critical air routes make them a genuine and ongoing source of potential disruption to travel across much of the world. History has already shown how disruptive volcanic ash can be to aviation, with eruptions in various parts of the world causing the grounding of flights and the closure of airspace over enormous areas, stranding travelers and costing the aviation industry dearly. The volcanoes of Alaska sit in a particularly sensitive location, beneath the flight paths that connect two of the world's great economic regions, so that an eruption there has the potential to disrupt a vital artery of global travel and trade. To manage this threat, scientists maintain a constant watch over the Alaskan volcanoes and work closely with the aviation authorities, tracking ash clouds and issuing warnings so that aircraft can avoid the danger. This system of monitoring and warning is a remarkable achievement, one that has allowed air travel to continue safely, even in a region of frequent volcanic activity, and it is a reminder that the disruption from volcanoes can be managed and mitigated through careful science and cooperation, even if it cannot be entirely eliminated. Quick pause, because this is worth sharing. If you are finding this fascinating, tap the like button. It really does help the video reach more curious people. And if you have family or friends who love science or who travel often, share this with them, because it is genuinely interesting to understand how volcanoes can reach so far. One like, one share to someone you care about, and let's keep going. The Hawaiian volcanoes and the disruption of lava and haze, our fourth entry, takes us to Hawaii, home to some of the most active volcanoes on Earth, which cause a very different kind of disruption from the explosive ash of the mainland volcanoes. The slow but relentless disruption of flowing lava and volcanic haze. The great volcanoes of the Big Island of Hawaii. Unlike the explosive peaks of the Cascades, typically erupt by producing flows of lava that pour out and travel across the landscape, a spectacle that is dangerous in its own way, but different in character. When these volcanoes erupt, the lava can advance toward communities and infrastructure, threatening homes, roads, and everything in its path. And while the flows generally move slowly enough that people can evacuate, they can destroy property, bury roads, and cut off communities, reshaping the map of the island. The disruption from Hawaii's volcanoes goes beyond the lava itself, because their eruptions also release volcanic gases that can create a haze that affects air quality across the islands, a phenomenon that can trouble the health of residents and disrupt daily life far from the actual flows. The eruptions can also affect the tourism on which so much of the island's economy depends, disrupting travel and closing areas to visitors. And because so much of the population and infrastructure of the Big Island sits on the flanks of these great active volcanoes, the question of where and when the lava will flow is a constant and serious concern, shaping where people can safely live and build. Hawaii's volcanoes are among the most active in the country. and they cause real and recurring disruption when they erupt, a slow but relentless kind of disruption, quite unlike the explosive ash of the mainland, and they are a reminder that America's volcanic threats come in many forms, from the sudden and violent to the slow and inexorable, each with its own power to disrupt the lives of the people who live in the shadow of the mountains. What makes the Hawaiian volcanoes especially instructive is that they erupt relatively frequently, so that the people of the islands have real and recent experience of the disruption that lava and haze can cause, and have developed ways of living with the ever-present possibility of an eruption. The recurring nature of the activity means that the disruption is not a distant hypothetical, but a familiar part of life on the Big Island, where residents understand that the volcanoes are living, active features of their home, capable of reshaping the landscape and disrupting their lives with little warning. This familiarity has bred a certain resilience, a readiness to respond and adapt, even as it underscores the reality that living near active volcanoes means living with the constant possibility of disruption. Yellowstone and the ultimate disruption, our fifth and final entry, is the one that captures the public imagination like no other. Yellowstone, the great supervolcano beneath the famous national park, which represents the ultimate potential for disruption, even as it is also the most misunderstood. Yellowstone is not a classic cone-shaped mountain, but a vast volcanic caldera, beneath which lies an enormous system of heat and partly molten rock, and it has produced in the deep past some of the largest eruptions in the geologic record. Events so vast that they spread ash across much of the continent. It is this history that makes Yellowstone the symbol of the ultimate volcanic disruption, because a great eruption on that scale would spread ash across an enormous area, disrupting agriculture, transportation, and daily life across a huge swath of the country. An event of a scale that would truly dwarf the disruption caused by any other volcano on this entire list. But it is absolutely essential to be clear and honest about Yellowstone, because it is the subject of more myth and misunderstanding than any other volcano. Yellowstone is not overdue for an eruption, a persistent falsehood with no basis in how the volcano behaves. And it is not showing any signs of an approaching eruption. Its greatest eruptions occurred only a handful of times, separated by intervals of hundreds of thousands of years, and the far more likely future activity, if any, would be much smaller events, posing little threat of widespread disruption. The system is monitored with extraordinary care, and scientists see no sign that a great eruption is coming in any foreseeable time frame. Yellowstone earns its place on this list not because a catastrophic eruption is likely or imminent, for it is neither, but because it represents the theoretical upper limit of volcanic disruption in the country, the one volcano whose greatest eruptions could disrupt the entire nation. To include it is to acknowledge its extraordinary potential, while emphasizing, clearly and firmly, that this potential is not a present danger, and that the fascination with Yellowstone should be tempered by an understanding of just how rare and how unlikely its greatest eruptions truly are. Alright, I know, second time I am bringing this up, feel free to sigh at me. But quickly, if you have made it this deep into a video about America's volcanoes, you clearly find this stuff fascinating, and a lot of you who watch have not subscribed yet. That one tap genuinely tips the scales for a small channel like ours. No guilt, just a grateful ask. That is the last time, promise. Let's finish. The hidden ways an eruption ripples outward it is worth pausing to consider more fully just how far the disruption from a volcanic eruption can ripple, because the interconnected nature of the modern world means that an eruption in one place can cause problems in many others in ways that are not always obvious. Consider the effect on supply chains, for example, because when ash grounds aircraft or closes airports, it is not only passengers who are affected, but the cargo that travels by air. The goods and parts and shipments that a modern economy depends on moving quickly, so that an eruption can disrupt commerce far from the volcano. When roads and railways are buried or blocked, the movement of goods by land is disrupted as well, and the effects ripple through the networks that connect the economy. An eruption that closes a region can affect businesses, factories, and markets across a much wider area because of how tightly the modern economy is woven together. The disruption can reach into the systems that sustain daily life as well. Ash can foul water supplies, forcing communities to find alternatives, and it can damage the electrical grid, cutting power over a wide area. It can close schools and businesses, disrupt medical services, and force the evacuation of large populations, straining the systems that respond to emergencies. And the psychological and social disruption of a major eruption, the fear, the displacement, the uncertainty, can affect a region long after the ash has settled. These hidden ripples are part of what makes the disruption from a volcano so far-reaching, because in a modern, interconnected society, the effects of an eruption do not stay contained near the mountain but spread outward through the countless connections that bind the modern world together. Understanding these ripples helps to reveal why even a volcano in a remote area can cause disruption felt by millions, and why the potential for disruption, rather than the immediate destruction, is often the most significant aspect of a volcanic eruption in the modern age. What these 5 volcanoes really teach us, having explored these 5 volcanoes. From the mudflows of Rainier to the ash of St. Helens, from the aviation threat of Alaska to the lava of Hawaii and the vast potential of Yellowstone, we can step back and consider what they teach us together about volcanoes and disruption. The first lesson is that the greatest impacts of a volcano are often not the fiery destruction near the mountain, but the far-reaching disruption that can ripple outward across regions and even the world, through ash that grounds aircraft and paralyzes cities, through mudflows that threaten populated valleys, through lava that buries infrastructure, and through haze that fouls the air. To understand the true significance of these volcanoes is to understand that their power lies not only in their immediate surroundings, but in their capacity to reach into the interconnected systems of the modern world, disrupting travel, commerce, and daily life far from the mountains themselves. The second lesson is one of calm and informed perspective, the understanding that these volcanoes, for all their potential for disruption, are not a source of imminent danger, but a feature of the natural world that is watched over with great care. Not one of these volcanoes is erupting or stirring toward eruption, and the science that monitors them is so advanced that any genuine change would be detected early, giving time to understand and prepare. The monitoring systems that watch these mountains, that track their ash clouds and their tremors and their movements, are a large part of why we can regard them with fascination rather than fear, because they ensure that the volcanoes are understood and that their behavior is never a mystery. To know about these 5 volcanoes is not to live in dread of them, but to appreciate the remarkable and varied ways that the Earth's volcanic power can touch the modern world, and to respect the science that keeps watch over them. These 5 volcanoes could indeed cause massive disruption if they erupt, but their eruptions are not imminent, and the knowledge of what they could do is not a reason for fear, but an invitation to understand our extraordinary planet and the remarkable systems that stand ready to protect us from its rare but powerful moments of upheaval. So the next time you hear about one of these great volcanoes, you can set aside any fear and feel instead a sense of informed wonder, knowing that these mountains are watched over with care, that their eruptions are not imminent, and that the science devoted to them stands ready to give warning should any of them ever stir. The 5 volcanoes we have explored are not threats looming over us, but marvels of the natural world, each a reminder of the deep power of the